Welcome, folks, to our How to Identify Native Trees workshop. It's really great to see lots of people from all over the UK and beyond as well. We've even got somebody from Virginia in America watching tonight, so that's fantastic. So welcome to the live workshop. And if you're watching the recording afterwards on YouTube or elsewhere, welcome. And if you have any questions, post them in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to you after the fact. But for now, back to the live audience. Firstly, welcome. My name is James Kendall from Woodland Classroom. And what I'll do is I will share my screen. There we go, folks. Welcome to How to Identify Native Trees. So what we're going to do tonight, folks, by the end of this workshop, by the end of this hour that you're going to spend with us, you should get a solid grounding in how to identify native trees of the UK and Ireland. That's what we're going to concentrate on tonight, particularly native trees, hence the title. We're going to let you know what is the difference between native, naturalized, and non-native trees. So what's the story with that? We're going to be looking at things like leaves, flowers, fruit, tree form, even bark, other signs you can see, particularly in summer. So we're going to be looking at how to identify trees when they're fully in leaf and when there are some fruits and leaves, fruits and flowers around as well in the season. As we're recording this, it's early July. So that really informs the kind of pictures we're going to be seeing rather than talking about trees in winter. If you are interested in identifying trees in winter, autumn, or spring, we do have workshops on that on our YouTube channel on Woodland Classroom, so feel free to check those out afterwards. You're going to learn 3 key principles for tree identification. And these are three little hacks or techniques that I use and can be applied to any species to help narrow down what you're looking at. We're going to feature around 12 common native species, that probably more will come up in total. And we're going to also demystify looking at similar looking leaves. So trees that have similar looking leaves, what are the differences between them? So you can then put that into practice when you go out your door, hopefully this weekend or after watching this workshop. I'm also going to include a little bit, slightly more advanced knowledge as well. We're going to be looking at our lime trees in detail because there's 3 native lime trees in Britain. I'm going to be having a look at breaking them down between the differences. We're going to do some Q&A. So if you've got any questions in the live chat, pop them in the chat with your name as well. Pop your name with it because I'm having a bit of a problem with everybody having the same name in this workshop at the minute. So stick your name in the question when you put it in the chat there, folks. And we'll do some questions at the end, a proper Q&A, but also if I see a good question that really demonstrates a good point or brings up something interesting for everyone, I might just stop my flow and answer that one. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you how you can get your hands on the ultimate tree ID resource. So that's very exciting. More news about that coming up later on, folks, but just a little bit about me as well. So I said, my name is James Kendall. I'm the head bushcraft tutor at Woodland Classroom. We're based in North East Wales, just in Wrexham, and we work all across the North East Wales area into Cheshire, and we go to festivals and all kinds as well, doing workshops. And my particular interest is trees, woodland, bushcraft that comes with it, the foraging of wild food that comes with it, because trees encompasses so much. Of course, we can make things out of them. They have great biodiversity value and wildlife interest. There's things we can eat with trees, fungi associated with trees. You know, trees are amazing, aren't they? We all love trees. Now, hopefully that's why you're here, because you have a real interest in them. But if you want to know more about the work that we do, head to woodlandclassroom.com. But certainly myself, when I started, studying trees, working in outdoor education, I wasn't sure what I was looking at when it came to trees half the time. There's a lot of trees out there. It was confusing. And, I put the time in, and that's the thing. And that's what this is all about. I'm going to give you some techniques that you can use tonight and give you some tips and point you in the right direction. But it is all about putting that time in, and hopefully I'm going to share that experience and pass it on to you so you can get a real head start and a kickstart to improving your own tree ID skills. Okay. Now, interesting, David's just started eating wild cherries. Now is the time for wild cherries. Actually, he's just popped it in the chat room there. Perfect time for wild cherries, but you've got to beat the birds to them, folks. We'll talk about wild cherry later. So this workshop is called How to Identify Native Trees, and that's the key word here. What do we mean by that? Well, in Britain, we're quite lucky, actually. You could say lucky or unlucky. We're lucky from a point of view of tree ID because we only have so many native trees in this country, much less than there are on the continent. maybe we're unlucky from a biodiversity point of view because we've missed out on all those other trees that didn't cross the land bridge. But I think Britain's got its own unique ecosystem. And we also have more veteran oak trees than any other country in Europe, which is pretty amazing. So although we're not that forested compared to some countries in Europe, we do have more veteran oaks than any other country. So, you know, it's an important place where we are now. And the countryside and the trees we do have are very much to be valued. But let's talk about, what do we mean by native, naturalized, and non-native? So basically, native trees are trees that colonized what is now the UK, basically after the last ice age, while the land bridge was still connecting us to the rest of the continent, and they made it across the land. So they've been here a long while. That's what we mean by a native tree. So this is talking about 10,000 years ago when the last ice age kind of, the ice retreated. So they've been here a good while. Now, some trees move faster than others, which is an interesting concept in itself, really, isn't it? A birch tree is a tree that's known as a pioneer, and they throw out a lot of seeds. And for trees, they move pretty quickly across the landscape. And anyone who's ever left land to go to scrub will be able to attest to that birch is one of the first trees to move in. So birch has been here a long time. And of course, birch is right up in the Arctic as well, and in the tundra and the boreal forest. But then a tree like beech is, traditionally only native to southern Britain. It was one of the last ones to come across before we were severed from the rest of the continent. So although you will find beech planted all over the UK, it's really native to southern Britain. So there's a lot of trees that are native, but some more widespread than others. I've got a little list here to show you guys what I'm talking about. There we go, folks, and you can see this list. Here is the list of, a list of native trees of UK and Ireland. And I say a list because there is debate as to how many native trees we actually have. You will see anything from 32 to 50 banded around. So, even like I went on the Woodland Trust website this morning to have a little look what they say, and they give a different native tree list to what I've given here. A lot of it's the same, but there are some differences. These are the ones that I put on my list for native trees of UK and Ireland. Now, I've got 48 listed here. Now, for us getting into tree ID, that's quite an achievable number of trees, considering there are quite a few differences between them. When we go onto the continent, we're talking 200, native trees. So suddenly that number's gone right up there. So, this is quite encouraging that we've got a lower number to start with. And also, you notice I put some in bold there. The ones that I put in bold are the ones that if I was beginning tree ID, they're the ones I concentrate on. The other ones are maybe less common, less seen, the ones in bold are the ones that you're going to come across all the time, our woodland and hedgerow species. The other ones have more specialist habitats really, or rarer. So those are the ones I concentrate on. So, 48 species and even less if you want to concentrate on the really common ones is quite doable and achievable. So for someone starting out in tree ID, I hope that gives you some encouragement. The problem is, why is there a difference between, how many native trees there are? Because there is debate in the world of botany about some trees which are exactly native or not, and whether certain trees are in fact a species or a hybrid. So there are problem areas. Willows are a problem area. There are a lot of willows out there, and there's debate as to how many of those are native. For instance, weeping willow is not a native tree, though it's very common. It's actually a hybrid. White beams are a problem. The sorbus, they're in the family of sorbus, like rowan. There's a lot of very local white beams. There's a Llangollen white beam just 20 minutes down the road from us, which technically I put on this list, but it only grows in one little area. Elms are a bit of an issue. I've got English elm and wych elm here, but there are other local elms as well. Or what's the other one? Pears. There seems to be a bit of debate as to whether wild pear, common pear, Plymouth pear, how many of these are actually native. I just count the wild pear myself. So nature is never complicated. It's never black and white, is it? There's never a clear answer. But that's the list that I've got. And we're going to go through a few of these tonight. Then I mentioned naturalized trees. Naturalized trees are trees that have been brought in by us. And they've been here for so long, several hundred years, some of them, that they've naturalized and found their space in our countryside, in our environment. you know, for better or worse. There's quite a few here that you can see on the list. I pulled this list off Wikipedia earlier to see what they said about it. And it's interesting that a lot of these are actually forestry trees planted for timber. You know, you've got larch, you know, you've got cypress and spruce and, you know, pines there. But, you know, with naturalized trees, the three you really need to think about when you're starting out are there: horse chestnut, the conker tree, sweet chestnut, and sycamore, which is a maple, okay? We only have one native maple in this country, that's the field maple. So in terms of naturalized trees, when you're starting, I just worry about those three there. They're the three to concern yourself with, although you can see there are quite a few others which are pretty common around the landscape. Then the last classification is non-native trees. And there's the picture to come up. Basically, non-native is everything else you might come across, which is a massive list, far too big to post here. Okay, so anything you could come across, particularly in parks, gardens, country estates, where there's formal planting. And you can see I've included some examples there of anything which could be, you know, classed as a non-native. So, and they are not going to be included tonight. We're not going to talk about those because that is a can of worms around. Let's concentrate on the ones that we mostly see out and about in the countryside, folks. Okay. Right, what we're going to do now, we're going to go on to the three key principles of tree ID. Let's go for 3 key principles of tree ID. These are 3 little tricks I like to use when identifying trees out in the countryside. Because what I think it's important to do, even if you've got 48 to buzz around in your mind, you want to whittle them down and play an elimination game. Put them in a funnel and it gets narrower, narrower, narrower until it can only be 1 or 2 things. And these little tricks can help you do that. So let me go through those now. Okay, my 3 key principles are: number 1, tune in. Tune into your environment. Number 2, begin with a branch. And number 3 is a question: alternate or opposite. Let's break these down. So number 1, tune into your surroundings. Basically, it's very important whether you're bird watching, tracking, foraging, or doing tree ID to slow down. Slow down, sit down for 5 minutes and just think, where am I? You know, if you're going to spend a day looking around in the environment, where am I? What's the context? Am I on open moorland? Am I in a country estate? Am I on the edge of a city? Am I in a formal park? Am I just on farmland? The more you tune into the environment, the more useful this habit becomes, because it's about asking the questions about what you expect to see. So if you're in uplands, you're going to expect to see certain things: birch, rowan, goat willow, probably hawthorns, things like that in uplands. If you're in wetlands near rivers, you're probably going to see alders and willows. If you're on a National Trust country estate, you're probably going to see a fair few exotics that have been planted here or there: monkey puzzle trees or giant sequoia, things like that. If you're in gardens, it could be anyone's guess, because all kinds of exotic species are brought in. Tuning in is important. The more you do it, the more useful this becomes, because again, it's asking that question: what do I expect to see in this environment, and what do I not expect to see? Because that can help you notice when something really stands out. So practice slowing down and tuning in, okay? It also gives you context. So if you're in a forest, as to whether it's been planted or not. Are you in a formal forestry plantation that was planted in the last 100 years? Or are you in an ancient woodland where everything is naturally seeded? So it's less, you know, as much where I am as to what's the history here. So that's interesting. Number 2 is begin with a branch. When we look at a whole tree and we want to ID it, it could be quite overwhelming. And where do you start? Well, everything you need to know to identify a tree is at the end of a healthy branch. That's what you need. Find a nice, young, healthy branch, pick that, and at the end of that twig there will be everything you need to ID the tree. Granted, with some species, there might be one feature which absolutely stands out, like a silver birch. You look at the bark and go, oh, it's a silver birch. But as a general rule, with all trees, begin with a branch and everything you need to know is there. The bud arrangement, the leaves, there might be fruits or flowers, the bark color, how it feels, how it smells, sometimes how it tastes. It's all there in that branch. And then other signs can be used around this to bolster your idea of what the tree is. Okay. Number 3 is a question. Once we've got that branch, we ask a question. Is it alternate or opposite? So look at the bud or leaf arrangement. Are the leaves or buds arranged in opposite pairs or are they alternate? So here we go. On the right, are they in opposite pairs? So 2, 4, 6, 8. Or are they alternate? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, do you see the difference there? That's really important. In winter, it's really important because you can see it clearly without any leaves on. You've just got the buds. And in summer, equally, you can see it with the leaf arrangement. So in winter, it's the bud arrangement. In the summer, it's the leaf arrangement, which of course come out of the buds. This applies to broadleafs mostly, folks, not to conifers. Okay, we're talking about broadleafs, oak, ash, hawthorn, that kind of thing. Let me show you what I mean by this. Have a look at this elder. This is an elder in very early spring, very common native tree of ours. See how the buds are in opposite pairs? There's one and there's one opposite it. And these are the young leaves just springing out. They're in opposite pairs. Here is a blackthorn. And look here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. There's no opposite here and there's no opposite here, is there? Or here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. They're alternate, okay? When you ask this question, it suddenly eliminates a whole load of species off your list. Once you start to get to know them, of course. So you can go, oh, it's in opposite pairs. It can only be one of these things. Or, oh, it's alternate. So there's no way it can be an ash tree, for instance. Okay. This is really important. And you'll see this demonstrated throughout this workshop. We'll do this principle, of course. So look for that alternate or opposite arrangement of the buds or the leaves, of course. Some trees break the rule. Don't worry about this. We're doing this for beginners, folks. Okay, let's talk about leaf shapes. So now you've done those things. You've found out whether it's alternate or opposite. Now let's look at the leaves, because we're talking about trees in the summer. What I like to do is to break down the leaves by shape. And I've come up with 10 groups. I couldn't really get it any less than that. I try to break it down to larger groups, but 10 leaf shapes is what we're looking at here. So we've got oval, round, heart-shaped leaves, lobed leaves like the oak, maple-like leaves like maple trees, compound leaves, triangular leaves, long and narrow leaves, needles, and then unusual shapes, which just don't really fit anywhere, which in themselves can be useful because if it doesn't look like anything else, you can immediately tell what it is. Let's have a look at what I mean by that and look at some examples. So, it's really useful to kind of, do shape recognition because as humans, our ancient ancestors were very good at pattern recognition, roaming around in the forest, foraging, hunter-gathering, looking for things that fit the picture, leaves that we knew we could eat, berries to recognize, shapes of animals to hunt. And we're really good at looking at things which are out of place as well. And so I think this way of pattern recognition, recognizing these shapes is a really good way, very ancient way of turning on that ancestor brain and looking at what we are seeing with the trees around us. Let's break up some examples here. First of all, the oval leaves. These are the most common leaf shape. It's probably the shape that a child draws when they draw a leaf. It's oval, usually with a pointed tip, though not always. It can be a rounded end, as you can see with the crabapple there. So we've got beech, crabapple, hornbeam, goat willow. They're all oval leaves with a bit of a tip, but all different, as you can see. So if you've got to a tree, it's got alternate buds, and then it's got oval leaves, there's still some work to be done there. But some of these other groups are even more useful because it can only be one of a few things. So oval leaves, definitely the largest group of them. But then you could go to something like, well, is the leaf edge simple? So just, no characteristics to it at all, like the goat willow, or is it toothed? So if you have a look at the hornbeam there, the leaf edge is toothed, it's serrated. The beech, ever so slightly so, and the crabapple, very finely serrated. So that's where we start to break down the details even more. Here are the round leaves. Now there's kind of three trees that I would put in the round leaf category: alder, hazel, and aspen. Okay, if it's a round leaf, it's most likely going to be one of those three. We'll come back to alder and hazel later because they do look quite similar. So we're going to compare them in more detail. But look how round the aspen leaf is. Very round, isn't it? And that's really quite distinctive. So let's go on to heart-shaped leaves. This is a great group because if you're seeing heart-shaped leaves, it can pretty much only be one thing. It's a lime tree, okay? There's 3 limes in Britain, 3 common native limes. And there's lots of others planted around the place, but 3 native limes in the countryside. And they all have heart-shaped leaves, as you can see. I've included hazel in the bottom because if you look at it, you could confuse it for a heart-shaped leaf. But we'll talk about hazel in more detail later and show why you wouldn't get it confused eventually. But I've put it there just to see that the common error that somebody might make. So heart-shaped leaf, it's probably a lime. Lobed leaves. The oak leaf is a lobed leaf. It's got a wavy edge, lobes. They could be big lobes or little lobes. We've got 2 native oaks in this country, the English oak, otherwise known as the peduncular oak, and the sessile oak, okay? The English oak is more native to southern Britain, although it's planted all over the place. And the sessile oak is more native to uplands and the west. So over here in Wales, I see more sessile oak out in the countryside than I do English oak. Though there are some very fine English oaks planted on the National Trust estate near us. The other big lobe leaf to know is the hawthorn. Very different from the blackthorn leaf, which is an oval leaf. So they are very different, although they have similar names. Look at that hawthorn leaf, much smaller than an oak leaf, but looks kind of like an oak leaf in miniature. A very good one to know because you can see that in hedgerows everywhere. And then you could argue that field maple is a lobe leaf, which it is, but maple-like leaves are a separate category. But there's the field maple, or only native maple there. And that leads us nicely onto maple-like leaves. Think of the Canadian flag, folks. It's like a hand, isn't it? Another name for these is palmate because it's like an open palm, usually with 5 points. So all maples have maple-like leaves. We only have one native maple in this country. That's the field maple, Acer campestre, though you will see many more in planted areas than non-natives. We do have one big naturalized maple, which is the sycamore, okay? So you can see they're both acers. They're both in that maple family. Perhaps you've got a exotic acer in your garden. There's lots of them about. But there's a couple of other trees which have maple-like leaves, which you could get confused for. One is the Gelder rose, okay? The Gelder rose in the top corner there has a maple-like leaf. It can be quite variable, but it's a good one to know. And the other one is the white poplar. Now that picture is taken in autumn because I couldn't find a good summer picture I'd taken of it. So it started to go yellow, but picture that leaf being green and it'd be easily confused for being a maple. However, you're not going to make that mistake because you've gone through the system. You're going to remember that rule, alternate or opposite. All maple trees have opposite leaves and opposite buds, all of them. White poplar and all the poplars have alternate leaves. So you'll never make that mistake. Follow that rule. If it's got a maple-like leaf and it's not opposite, it's probably going to be a white poplar. Okay, so that's a good one to know. The Gelder rose is in opposites, but it's a much more shrubby, smaller tree, much more like a shrub all round rather than a larger tree. Cool. Good one to know. These are compound leaves, okay, folks? So compound leaves are leaves made up of smaller leaflets, okay? So what you're seeing here is all one leaf. So this ash, that's one leaf. This elder, that's all one leaf made up of smaller leaflets. The same with the rowan, you can see there's more, and the horse chestnut as well. Not a native, but a good one that we all know. So these are compound leaves, leaves made up of smaller leaflets, okay, folks? We're going to go into ash, elder, and rowan in more detail later because they do look quite similar. But just to let you know, if you're seeing a compound leaf in the countryside, it's probably one of these 4. Those are the main ones to look out for, okay? Cool. We'll go into the differences a bit later on. Okay, triangular leaves, a very small group. We have 2 main native birches in this country, but for beginners, it's a birch. That's all you need to know. The silver birch and downy birch do have differences, and it's something I go into in the tree ID course I've created. But for beginners, it's a birch, and it has that black and white bark, doesn't it? Or white and black, I should say, because white is predominant. They have triangular leaves generally. The downy birch, sometimes diamond-like that you can see here, but generally triangular. The other 2 that have triangular leaves, one is our native black poplar that has triangular leaves, but they are much bigger, this kind of size, whereas birch leaves are down to this kind of size. And then there's a Lombardy poplar, which is that big, narrow, conical tree that you see planted in avenues that's come over from Italy. You see it in paintings of, Italian villas and estates. That has a similar triangular leaf, but it's much bigger. So generally, if you're seeing small triangle leaves, it's a birch tree. Long, narrow leaves. We tend to associate these with willows. We think of classic weeping willow, but if you look at crack willow and hosier, which is another type of willow, some people call it hosier willow, they're long, narrow, thin leaves, aren't they? Very distinctive. It's usually going to be a willow tree if you're seeing that. The other two to know about, one is sweet chestnut, not a native, a very long leaf, but big. You know, these can be as big as this, you know, and all, you know, as wide as my 3 fingers here. Big, big leaf. And then there's the sea buckthorn, which is not that common in the grand scheme of things. Very small little leaves. Looks a little bit like rosemary, doesn't it? But they are long, thin leaves for their size. Needles. If it's a needle, it's a conifer. We're not really going to talk about conifers tonight because that's a whole separate workshop. I know some people came on that one. We have 3 native conifers in this country: juniper, Scots pine, and yew. If it's got needles, it's a conifer. That's what we need to know for tonight. And it's a good group to know. I've included larch there because it's a very common non-native, some would say naturalized tree. Conifers are naturally waxy. They're waxy because they need to retain their moisture in winter. When it's cold and the wind would whip the moisture away, they have a waxy layer, which helps stop it happening. The same with holly. What have we got next? Then we get to our last group, the unusual leaves, the ones that just don't fit anywhere else. I've included a horse chestnut again here because it's just a bit weird, isn't it? It's a big, massive palmate compound leaf. But we've got 3 here. Holly, which we all know, doesn't really fit in any box, but we all know the holly leaf. We've got the wild service tree, one of our rarest native trees. Sort of looks like a stretched out maple leaf. If you see that, it can't be anything else. And if you found that, you're probably in a very ancient woodland. And the last one is the strawberry tree, which is probably also argued to be the rarest native tree because it's native only to Western Ireland. And that is a weird leaf as well. It's a very waxy, kind of like a holly leaf, but also not spiky. Strange little leaf, that one. So a good one to know. Okay, folks. Right, folks, let's go on to the next section. I've created a quick guide, and in a minute, Charlotte will, the real Charlotte, will share the link to this. I've created this little PDF guide that you guys can download for free. Charlotte will put the link to this in a second in the chat room, and I'll send it in an email as well afterwards. It's a little printout guide that you can take out with you or put it on your mobile phone and use it when you're out walking. And it breaks up our native tree leaves by shape, like I've just done. And I put like shapes together so you can see ones that look similar and compare them side by side. So do check that out. Do download it and grab that. So I'll ask Charlotte to pop that link in there for us. And if you're watching the recording afterwards, the link to that will be in the description of the video on YouTube. Thanks for that, Charlotte. That's brilliant. Okay, folks, we're going to crack straight on. Let's go on to some trees which get confused for each other. So let's put this stuff into practice. Okay. Here we go. Let's look at alder versus hazel. We talked about these 2 very common trees. They can be easily confused because they've both got round leaves. Okay. First of all, the alder. Okay. Going back to our key principles, is it alternate or opposite? Well, it's alternate. Okay. Right. So it's alternate leaf. That's good to know. Sometimes it has a notched tip. Do you see here where my cursor is? Do you see that notch that's cut out as if a caterpillar has taken a bite out the end of it? They often have that. Not always. Sometimes they're totally round, but a lot of them do have that little bite out the tip. And that's important when comparing it to hazel. They're also glossier than hazel. You can see the shine in that picture there. Really quite a glossy leaf all round, almost waxy. Okay. And they're not hairy at all either. Let's have a look at some pictures here. Here's some nice picture of the leaf. You can see there's a little bit of variation, a slightly more elongated leaf there and a rounder one and one with a less of a notch, but they're all older leaves. They've got a bluntly toothed margin as well. Here we go. This is interesting. We've got something, an interesting feature here. Some young, what look like young pine cones, okay? These are young alder cones, of course, from the alder tree, and they look like cones. They're referred to as cones. They're not technically in the world of botany cones, but for our intents and purposes, they're cones because that's what they look like. So if you're seeing a broadleaf tree which has cones on it, it's got to be an alder. because there's nothing else you can see in the countryside that has that combination. Alder's a bit of a rule breaker. It breaks those rules because you think of cones, conifers with needles, but this one breaks the rules. So that's a really good thing to know because hazel doesn't have anything like this at all. So a really good one to know. Now, get a young twig of alder and roll it between your fingers. And you can sort of see it in this picture. It's not round, it's triangular. It's got 3 sides. And so, you know, for touch, which is a really good way for us to remember things, you close your eyes and feel it, and you think it's a ridge. That's not right. It's triangular. It's alder. Hazel isn't like that at all. So it's got 3 sides, the young twigs. Really good thing to know. Here's the cones when they're mature in winter. They very much look like cones now, don't they? They're only about so big. They're not big at all, but very woody. And those cones hang around right through winter. So even in winter, you could use those to identify the alder tree. They also have very purple buds in winter, but that's a story for another time. Where you're going to find alder as well is generally in wet areas. So next to rivers, wet woodland, you know, Carr is a name for wet woodland that has alder in it. So if you're near a river, canal side or wetland or wet meadow, it's quite likely you're going to have alder there alongside willows, whereas hazel doesn't like wet feet quite as much. So that's where tuning into your environment comes in as well. Here's something that's really indicative of alder trees. It's called epicormic growth. Lots of small bushy growth that just comes out of the base and higher up the trunk as well. So this isn't lots of new trees. This is one tree that's just sprouting lots of new growth at the base, like it's a great big bush. Above that photo there is the tree climbing right up, but that's the base of it. It's called epicormic growth, and it's not something that hazel does. So that's a really good thing to look out for. And if you look in the background, there's a river. So there's another sign that we've got alder. Here's hazel. Hazel, sometimes heart-shaped a little bit, but really I would call it rounded. Have a look there. It's not quite as neat a leaf, is it, all round, but is it alternate or opposite? It's alternate, so it's the same as hazel. So that rule doesn't help us between these two, but it does eliminate all the opposite leaf trees from the inquiry. Hazel leaves are hairy. Think of a rhyme, hairy hazel, okay? If you feel the young growth, the twig, that can often have bristles on it, but like bristles on a pig. And the leaves can feel a bit hairy as well. Remember the older leaves were glossy and a bit shiny? Hazel leaves aren't like that. Hazel also typically has this. Look at that drawn out tip, yeah? Whereas the alder was round or with an indent like a caterpillar taking a bite. That drawn out tip is hazel, okay? Really good way to notice the difference between the two. You can see the hairs on this twig here. Can you see them down here where my cursor is? Once I get my cursor out of the way. There's the hairy twigs of the hazel, and you'll feel it on the leaf as well. Of course, hazel has hazel nuts, so you may find those growing, especially at this time of year. You'll find the young hazel nuts growing, and the squirrels will be trying to eat them before they're ripe. But of course, alder has cones, nothing like that at all. Here's the young hazelnuts here. That's what they look like right about now, actually. Yeah, in the summer, yeah. Young with these frilly jackets called bracts. Okay. There's the hairy stem again, a really good picture. It's really picked out there. Very different. And of course, the stem is round. It's not triangular like alder. One other thing you need to know about hazel, I noticed somebody mentioned this before. You need to be aware of wych elm. It looks a little bit like a stretched out hazel. There's hazel on the left and wych elm on the right. We're not going to go into full details here, folks, but get to know wych elm as well. It's a good one to know. The main thing I'd say is generally wych elm leaves are bigger than hazel. They can be this big, although I've picked two that match there. And whereas hazel leaves are hairy, wych elm leaves feel rough, almost like sandpaper. That's a good way to notice the difference between the two. Okay. Yeah, so alder as well, it's a darker tree around darker bark. Hazel also naturally coppices, and it has lots of young stems, lots of straight stems or whips coming out of the ground or rods. So it has lots of multiple stems, whereas alder tends to grow more as a single tree. It can have several trunks, but it tends to grow as a larger tree, whereas hazel tends to stay shrubby generally. Let's compare another one. Teresa's pointed out that alder has catkins. Yes, but so does hazel, which is why I didn't mention it. In the winter, they both have catkins in the winter and early spring. Hazel catkins are yellow, alder catkins are purple. So there's a little difference between the two. But yeah, they do both have catkins. Yeah. So let's do ash versus rowan versus elder. Okay, these are those compound leaves we looked at earlier. Okay. Okay, compound leaves, leaves made up of lots of smaller leaflets. First of all, the ash. We begin with a branch. Is it alternate or opposite? Well, it's opposite. Okay, I'm not talking about these being opposite. I'm talking about where this leaf joins the branch, there'll be another one opposite it. Okay, so it grows in opposite pairs. That's important because only a few trees, I think maybe about 8 of our natives, grow in opposite pairs around that. So that immediately narrows it right down. So we're on to a winner if it's an opposite. Between 7 to 13 little leaflets. It's quite variable and they're quite large. The whole leaf is around 35 centimeters long. And a very gently toothed margin, okay? But look close, behind the leaves, you'll see this, the black buds waiting dormantly for next year. You can see them now. No other tree has buds like this. In winter, it's really obvious because all the leaves are fallen away. And the terminal bud looks like the tip of a Phillips screwdriver. They're jet black and they're in opposite pairs. And the one at the end looks like a screwdriver tip. Can't be anything else. Here's ash up in the sky. Ash are quite light in their foliage. You can see quite a lot of sky through the canopy, where some trees like sycamore are much more dense. So that can be a good way when IDing trees from a distance to tell the difference. But even here, you can see the leaflet, the leaves made up of several leaflets there on the branch as well. That's really important. And you won't see any big clusters of flowers like you will with the other ones. Let's go to rowan. Okay, the rowan tree, otherwise known as mountain ash. So I like to call it rowan to save confusion. Now, with the rowan tree, rowan tree, similar leaf. Is it alternate or opposite? It's alternate. So once you follow that rule, there's no way you will ever get ash and mountain ash confused ever again. It's a much smaller tree all round, much more compact, much more upright growth, and it has more leaflets per leaf as well. Between 11 to 17 leaflets per leaf. They're smaller and they're more obviously toothed around the edge. Okay, so that's a good way to recognize it. Very much alternate on the branch. Here's the underside as well, as you can see. So you can really see the teeth there. And also in the shot, another hint of something you won't see on an ash tree. Okay. You've got these young berries. Now, this is what the berries look like kind of now. But as the summer goes on and we get to autumn, they're going to change color. They start off as a lovely floret of creamy white flowers, a bit like elder, but they turn into these berries now, these rowan berries. And they're going to mature into these clusters of bright red berries. You can get non-natives, which have different colors, but our native is bright red. Of course, that's nothing like what we get on the ash tree. So a really good way to tell the two apart. Don't just look at the leaves, look at the whole picture. Okay. Here's real typical rowan growth. Remember I said that they're kind of compact and upright? That's exactly what I expect to see when I see a rowan. Whereas an ash can be a big old sprawling tree. This is very much neat and upright. Everything's pointing up. That's a mountain ash or a rowan tree. So look out for that tree form, especially useful in winter as well. And you'll see this in upland areas and moorlands as well, especially around my area. Here's the elder tree, another shrubby tree. So more in the shape of a rowan tree generally. It's a compound leaf made up of 5 to 7 leaflets generally, sometimes more, but generally 5 to 7. They are finely toothed. And are they alternate or opposite? They're in opposite pairs. So again, you'll never confuse it with the rowan tree. And it's much smaller all around, and you'll see other features which are different than the ash tree, of course. So opposite pairs. Elderflowers, they're just coming to the end of their season now. I hope people have been making elderflower cordial, maybe elderflower champagne. Maybe 2 weeks ago was probably the prime time to do it. You may still get some good elderflower. Lovely fragrance. We should be familiar with that. Nothing like that on an ash tree. They don't have flowers like this. So you shouldn't get that confused. And although rowan has similar flowers, it's got alternate leaves, not opposite. Whereas these are quite clearly opposite. Look, 1, 2, there they are, opposite each other. So the elderflowers in June, just coming to the end now. There they are, looking lovely there, really fragrant. The leaves actually have an unpleasant smell when they're crushed as opposed to the flowers. Although the flowers, if you pick them on a wet day, It's not a good day to pick them. Always pick them on a sunny day if you want to make something out of them. Here's the young and kind of more mature flowers side by side as they start to blow out as the petals unfurl. This would be probably about 3 weeks ago, I'd say. And then as we get into later summer, those flowers start to turn into clusters of what are going to be berries. And the leaves can turn color too. They can actually go purple. Some beautiful colors from the elder, whereas the ash doesn't give a good show of color whatsoever. Here's the elderberries in autumn, which we should probably be familiar with as well. Again, ash and rowan don't have anything like this. The rowan berries are red and the ash don't have berries. They have keys, like dangling keys, like key fobs in bunches. Cool. Those are the differences between those three, folks. So I think the message here is to look at the whole picture. Teresa said, aha, that's good. I hope you had an aha moment. That's good. Rowan makes beautiful jelly. Yeah, you can make wild food with rowan berries, but you must cook them. You can't eat them raw. And elderberries must be cooked as well because they have a little bit of cyanide in the seed. So you can eat the odd one, but really cook them if you're going to eat them en masse, or ferment them. That's the other way. But generally, when we're making stuff out of those berries, out of the elder, we remove the seeds and skins. So we put it through a muslin cloth and just extract the juice later. So yeah, but yeah, they are edible. Okay, folks, let's do something a little bit more advanced, just for fun. Let's talk about lime trees. We've got 3 native lime trees in Britain, okay? There are lots of other limes planted around the place, but we have the common lime, which is the most common. We have the small leaf lime, and we have the large leaf lime. Now, the common lime is actually a hybrid between the small and large leaf lime, so they do show characteristics of both. But remember with the limes, it's a heart-shaped leaf. If that's what you're seeing, it's probably a lime. Okay, folks, let's get the limes up. Here they are, side by side. Just for our convenience, there's something 50p for scale. Those are, you've got the small leaf lime first on the left, the large leaf lime in the middle, and the common lime on the right. Now, that's all well and good when they're side by side, but you're rarely going to get the 3 of them side by side. So you need to kind of know them out of context, really. And that's what we're going to talk about. And actually, although the large leaf lime generally has larger leaves and the small leaf lime generally smaller, hence the name, you get variation of leaf size across the tree. So it's not super useful, that, especially with the common lime, because that's halfway between the two, as you would expect. Okay, but heart-shaped leaves with a toothed margin and a drawn-out tip. Very common. Okay, folks, let's have a little look. Here's the small leaf lime, which is more a tree of ancient woodlands, although you get it planted now in country parks as well. Now, right now, this time of year, in fact, even just a week ago, the flowers were at their best, and lime flowers are really distinctive because they don't look like anything else. So summer's a great time to get to know lime trees, okay? So limes don't just have the heart-shaped leaf, they have a second leaf. And this leaf is called a bract, and it's a very special leaf. We're going to see it in a minute. And the bracts hang around for quite a while, but the flowers have a very short lifespan. They're only out for a couple of weeks, so they're coming right to their end now. And as we get closer, we see this. And I took this yesterday, and this is from a small leaf lime. So they are still out and about, and bees absolutely love this. So if you're walking in the woods and you can hear up above a tree is absolutely buzzing with pollinators on a sunny day, it could well be a lime you're looking at. It's very likely. Either that or a laburnum, but you probably know that because it's all yellow and it's earlier in the year. But a lime is what you're going to see in woodlands. Look at these flowers. They're really beautiful, and they're attached to this bract, this special leaf. So not only do you get the heart-shaped leaves, you can also see those long, thin, almost yellow leaves in the canopy as well. If we get up closer, there they are. It's so unique. There's nothing else that looks like that out in the countryside. And those little bracts not only hang around until autumn, but in winter, you can find them on the floor. And that's really distinctive. They do hang about, and you know you've got a lime tree. But these flowers, you can make a tea out of them, actually. They make a very sweet, fragrant tea. And it's a good medicine too. But they've got a lovely, pleasant smell to them. And these flowers, as I say, pollinators love them. But look at the way the flower comes out in the middle of the leaf here. That's really unique. And what this, now I've actually turned it upside down. If you imagine it the other way up, the leaf acts as a hat to keep water away from the flowers. So The pollen isn't washed away and it's more attractive to pollinators because the flowers are very delicate. So that bract is like a little hat for the leaf, really distinctive. But all three lines have these. So the flowers aren't that useful to tell the difference between the three, but they are useful to tell you you've got a line. There's some lovely flowers there with the bracts as well, and the heart-shaped leaves behind. Here's the trick. This is how you tell the difference between the three. Okay, you need to turn the leaf over, and on the underside of the leaf, in what's known as the axil, the axils, which are these little acute points between the veins, do you see this fuzz, this hair? On the common line, that hair is an off-white colour. Okay. You can also see it here in these other axils. In the large leaf lime, they're an off-white colour. You can see it there as well. Just there, there's white hairs. You can see it easier with the eye. With the small leaf lime, they're orange or like a buff colour, okay? You can see the difference there. They're an orange colour, these little hairs here. That's a big difference. If you've got the orange hairs beneath, it's got to be the small leaf lime out in the woods, and you can tell that. However, how do we tell the difference now between the common and the large leaf lime? Because they've both got these whitish hairs. This is what you need to look out for. On the left, we've got common lime. On the right, large leaf lime. The common lime has often epicormic growth. Remember, we had that with the alder, that bushy growth coming out of the base and on the trunk. Look at this common lime on the left. Loads of bushy epicormic growth being thrown out. Large leaf lime doesn't do this. You won't see it on large leaf lime. That's a big difference between the two. So first look under the leaf, look for the colour of the hairs, then look at the growth of the whole thing. If it's got bushy growth on the trunk or at the base, it's going to be a common lime. Okay. And also large leaf lime is native more to southern Britain. It is planted around the place. You do get it planted on streets as well. But generally the common lime is named for a purpose. It's the one you're most likely to see. So there's a bit of advanced, really look at the details of the lines. Okay, let's do one more. Oh, we're going to run out of time, aren't we? We're just going to keep going, folks. Let's do wild cherry versus bird cherry. Now, somebody mentioned eating bird cherries earlier. I think it was Dave, wild cherries earlier. Don't eat bird cherries, they're horrible. Wild cherry, it's in season now. They're looking just like this. And if you can get them really cherry red, they'll be beautiful and sweet. But you can eat them when they're this color. They're just a little bit sour, but, you know, a bit of sugar with them if you wanted to, and they'll be absolutely fine. Thing is, the birds eat them all. So, but in this time of year, seeing these dripping all over a tree, it's got to be the wild cherry. Beautiful stuff. Now, the wild cherry and bird cherry are our two native cherries. There's a lot of foreign cherries that have been brought in. You know, you get Japanese flowering cherries, beautiful stuff in people's gardens or in country estates. But out in the countryside, these are the two you're going to see, wild and bird cherry. Okay. Wild cherry, very much drooping down with its leaves, very pendulous with the leaves. And the cherries are large and they turn a bright, deep cherry red color. Okay. The leaves have quite a glossy look to them as well. Oval leaves with a pointed tip. There's good cherries. I managed to beat the birds to these ones. There's good cherry red fruits from last year, and they taste great. If you're seeing these hanging in a tree, folks, eat them. They're great. Watch out for the stones. But it saves you buying cherries from the shops. Really good stuff. I made a summer pudding with them last year. Here's those cherry leaves, wild cherry, with quite a largely toothed margin. Okay, that's important. And cherry red cherries. At the end of summer, you'll see this on the floor. The cherry leaves turn red and they start to curl up and they drop. Even before autumn, they start to drop. And you'll see fallen cherries on the ground and you'll see cherry stones as well, if you really look hard enough. So look on the floor at the end of summer. I think this was taken in August, and you'll probably see this under wild cherry. The other big thing that you can use all times of the year in wild cherry is the bark. Glossy and with these stripes. These lenticels, these stripes, the bands going across the trunk, and you see lots of appealing quality, a bit like birch bark. Bird cherry doesn't look anything like this. So if you see that at any time of year, it can only be the wild cherry out in the countryside. It's so distinctive. Bark is great because when you've got distinctive bark, you can rely on it 12 months of the year. Let's look at bird cherry. I took this picture yesterday. Bird cherry looks similar all round, but the fruits are different. The bark is very different. It's very smooth and very brown, grey, very dull, nothing distinctive about it. But the The bird cherries are only fit for birds. They're very sour. They're inedible. Don't eat them, folks. You'll know if you've put a bird cherry in your mouth. It's like eating a sloe. Very astringent. It's not poisonous, but very unpleasant. And they're smaller and they're black, not cherry red. Okay. Look at the leaf as well. Much smaller teeth all round. They're not as toothed as the wild cherry. The bird cherry also comes into season usually slightly later, usually comes into fruit slightly later, the wild cherry, although this year I've noticed they're really close up next to each other. Here's one of the cherries close up, and we're talking, they're pretty small, half the size of your wild cherries. And there they are, they're alternate. Both cherries are alternate, of course. That rule is not going to help us this time. But yeah, there you can see. And the bird cherries grow on these longer stalks, where you have shorter stalks coming off them, whereas the wild cherries grow on individual stalks, the fruit. Here they are side by side. Wild cherry on the left, bird cherry on the right. There's the difference. Obviously, if you can get them side by side, it really helps. But again, it comes with practice, doesn't it, folks? The more practice you put in, the more you'll just start to click with the shapes and look at what you're looking at and recognize what you're looking at. So that's wild cherry and bird cherry. Very quickly gone over there, folks. Okay. Brilliant. Any questions while we're here? I'll just check. Brilliant. Awesome. No big questions. Right, folks. So we're going to do some Q&As in a minute. I realize we're quite short on time. We've rattled through this and I hope people are finding it useful and hopefully inspiring too. As I said, there is that free tree ID guide that we're sending the link to as well. But if you guys have enjoyed this, there is more good stuff, as I know some people in the room will probably attest to, because they're on my course. If you're enjoying this and you want more and you're inspired to know more about trees, I do have a course. It's called the Complete Tree ID course. And hopefully it speaks for itself in the title. It takes you through all our native tree species in all 4 seasons. So all the photos you've seen tonight are all from the course. And I've gone out over the last 4 years, actually. I've been filming 4 years and I'm still filming it as the course is ever growing and evolving. All our trees in different seasons and adding new trees on there. And basically the course takes you from clueless to confident in becoming a tree expert. So if you're ever out in the countryside, you're one of those people, like I hope you are tonight, that want to know really what you're looking at, then this is the course for you folks. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about what's involved. You get videos in every season for every tree. So you can watch me stand in the snow, you can watch me stand in the sun and with leaves falling all around me in autumn. And I visit all the different trees, different parts of the year with videos, and you can see it for yourself, what I'm looking at, looking on the ground, looking on the branches, looking at barks, buds in winter, and looking around for all the seasonal signs that those trees show us throughout the year. So you get loads of videos, which you can watch again and again in your own time. It's like a library, folks. Without beginning, middle, and end, you just watch the videos and trees you want to watch that you're interested in, and you can go back to them as many times as you want. You also get handouts and cheat sheets, which are all downloadable. So these are all examples. You get a cheat sheet for every tree in each season. So you can get something you can download to your phone. You can look at Hazel in spring, for instance, and it will tell you the top 4 things to look out for. You can print it out or put it on your phone and take it out with you and look for those signs, and it'll tell you the key features. And those features match up with what I teach in the videos. So you get all those handouts as well, which come with it for you to download. And then there's hundreds of high quality photos taken on location as well. And you can use those as references. If you teach outdoors yourself, you can use them in your own sessions. You're welcome to do that and use them as a resource. And there's high quality photos of barks, spring flowers and catkins, leaves falling on the ground, twigs, spring seeds, all kinds of stuff in all 4 seasons, close up, high quality, so you can see really what I'm talking about and see those differences and distinctive features for yourself. But I've also taken photos in studio, so you can see everything against a clean background and look at the details at different times of the year, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, and really see those details for yourself to improve your ID skills. There's also an online Facebook group. So when you join the course, you get to join a private Facebook group. We've got 144 members already, which is amazing. And people post articles, they share what they've found. You can ask me questions. I post little videos on there as well of things I'm looking at. And it's a nice community where people support each other. And it's great to see what everybody's doing there and seeing what everybody is finding around the country. So you get to join that group as well. So It's up to 40 native and common trees in all 4 seasons. You also get live student-only workshops, a bit like this, but just for the students and more in depth. You'll go from clueless to confident on your journey to becoming a tree expert. You get the cheat sheet, which I showed you earlier, which you can view on your phone or print off. You can also, at the top tier, get one-to-one coaching with me if you want that. And we'll spend an hour talking about anything you're struggling with and helping you out. And as I said, the course content is ever evolving and growing all the time. So I'm just about to add on another tree, wild pear, actually is going to be added to the course. And for this month only, for you guys attending this workshop as a thank you, and because obviously you're people who love trees, I'm going to do 20% off the course if you're interested, but it's for this month only. That offer is going to end on the 31st of July at midnight. So if you're watching this after the 31st of July on YouTube, you've missed the offer, but do check out the course anyway. We've got loads of testimonials of people on the course who've really enjoyed it. If you are on the course and you've enjoyed it and you're watching now, pop it in the chat room and let people know so they know there's real people on this course actually getting something out of it. It'd be lovely to know. But wait, there's more. I'm doing a live workshop later this month with our students. So if you want to be on that, where we talk about trees in summer in more detail, you can join that on the 19th of July if you're signed up to the course. So you'll get to join that as well, folks. So if you want to enroll and start learning, we've got a code here for 20% off. It's Know My Trees. And if you use that at the checkout, you'll get 20% off. And I'm going to send you guys an email tomorrow with a link to the course. I'm also going to send an email tonight with some details about what's in the course. You can read a bit more. But I'm going to open the course tomorrow for enrollments so you can get on there at 20% off. And this offer is for July only and ends on the 31st of July. But if you are still not convinced that this is worth your money, or, you know, it's not the right time for you to spend on a course, we've got a free taster you can try. It's called Kickstart Your Tree ID Skills. And there's over 3,000 people on this now, which is awesome. And it's basically 3 trees in all 4 seasons. So you get a taste of the whole thing with videos, cheat sheets, all that kind of thing, and photos. You can see what it's like. And if you like that, maybe you want to join the full course at some point. I'm going to send you the link to the free course tonight. And also, I think Charlotte's going to put it in the chat room in a minute. For those watching afterwards, it's in the description below, folks. That's the full course. I hope that's excited you guys, and we're going to see some of you on it. And I hope that this workshop has inspired you all around. If you've got any questions about the course, ask me. Send me an email at trees@woodlandclassroom.com. But for now, let's answer some questions, folks. I'll turn off the screen share. And I know we've had a ton of questions earlier. Some people have got to go. That's fine. I'll be sending the recordings. You can always watch the Q&A afterwards. So, folks, let's have a look. We've got loads of people in the room tonight. Who's got a question for us? If you post a question already, post it again now, because I won't scroll back through the chat. Let's have a quick look. Okay, lots of people saying thank you. So if you've got a question, folks, post it for me, and are black walnut native trees? Nope, they are not. So there is the common walnut. That's not native, but you do see it around. Generally, if you're seeing a walnut, it's been planted by somebody. Walnuts are not native. I wouldn't class them as naturalized either. They're still non-native. You don't really come across them in the countryside. So Jeanette asks, how would you categorize plain? That's a good question. I mean, somebody could put it in the naturalized column if they wanted to. I would probably put it in the non-native column. So the main one we see is London plane in London. And that's because it's a tree that not likes, but can cope with polluted air. And that's because it has that like jigsaw bark that flakes off in flakes. And when it gets too clogged off, it flakes off so the bark can breathe, which is pretty cool. I would put plain in, I would put it in non-native because it's still really restricted to where it's been planted. You don't tend to come across it in the countryside rather than naturalized, but somebody could argue that for sure. So David asks, why are squirrels stripping the sycamore bark to destruction? So squirrels love stripping bark on certain trees because they like to get to the sap as well. Partly, you know, to keep their teeth in check, but also they like to drink the sap and lick it. So birch sap is sweet, and sycamore sap, if you think it's a maple, think of sugar maple, there is a sweetness there because there's a relation. So they're after that sap and they go and eating that, and they're also keeping their teeth sharp. And this is why foresters don't like grey squirrels, because they can gnaw a lot of oaks and things as well and create really poor growth, which reduces the quality of the timber. So this is why a lot of squirrels are controlled in some forestry. Interesting. Any other questions? Let's have a look. I've got time for some more questions if people want to stay on for a couple of minutes. I'm very happy to do that, folks. Cankers. Now, cankers is a different thing. So somebody's asking what's a canker on a tree. The main one I know about is bleeding canker, which you get on horse chestnut. Canker is actually destructive to the tree. So if you look on a horse chestnut tree, which is a conker tree, and you ever see a kind of blood red, pretty much almost black, seeping, sticky ooze coming out of the trunk and wounds, that's bleeding canker. And that means that tree is going to die eventually. There's no cure for that at all. So cankers are bad. However, somebody is asking about wild cherry with sap oozing from them. That's not canker, that is the sap. Wild cherry has this resin, which looks kind of like amber. If you've seen Jurassic Park, it looks like the amber, the golden amber that comes out, which has the mosquito in it. Now that amber just kind of bleeds out of cherry and kind of settles in little blisters and bubbles, and it's quite beautiful stuff. It starts off very liquidy and then it goes hard. Lovely stuff. Why it does it, I have no idea, but it's a really good distinctive sign of wild cherry, actually. Interesting though, you can't use it to light fires like you can with the resin of spruce trees and pine. It doesn't work. I've tried it. Great, Robert's going to use tonight's information for his early years groups. Yes, Robert, feel free to use the handouts as well with your groups if you want to for Tree ID. You're very welcome to. And Ellie's a forest school teacher. Do you have any advice on how to get started? Oh, in forest school? I think that's it. Ellie, send me an email about that if you ask about forest school generally, and I'll answer that. Unless your question's about trees. So someone's asking, what is our take on planting sycamore and Norway maple as street trees for pollution cleaning in urban areas? Okay, so sycamore is a tree that also doesn't mind a bit of dirty air. It also kind of flakes off its bark, a bit like London plane. I would say more trees in cities and urban areas is a good thing. They make people calmer, they reduce stress, they clean the air. They provide habitat for wildlife, and they make things look nice. And, you know, if you're smart, you can actually create urban food forests as well, which actually provide a crop. So I would say, yeah, more trees all around. I would say plant diversity. Now, sycamore don't support a huge amount of biodiversity because they're not native, but a sycamore tree is better than no tree. So if it's the only tree that will take the air, then plant it. A plane tree supports even less biodiversity than a sycamore. So, you know, a tree is better than no tree, but if you could have an oak, even better. Michaela's asking about the difference between English and sessile oak trees. Okay, the difference very quickly. The difference between English and sessile oak. Sessile oak, sessile means stalkless. It's referring to the acorns. The acorns don't grow on stalks, they grow right on the twig, little cups on the twig. The English oak or pedunculate oak has peduncles, which are long stalks which the acorns hang on. That's the main difference between the two. There's more differences, and I'll talk about that in the full course. So there's a little tease for the full course, folks. Very last question, Leslie asks, is beech not native? It is native, absolutely, but it's native to southern Britain, although it's planted everywhere. But it was one of the last ones to come across the land bridge. So it's more native, endemic to southern Britain, but you get it all over the place. Cool. Well, thank you, folks. I hope you found that really useful. Thanks for staying on for the extra few minutes. This is going to go onto YouTube, this recording as well, folks. So if you enjoyed it, follow the link afterwards and do share it with others who love trees. And do check out the emails. I'll send one after this workshop and you'll get another one tomorrow with the link to the full Tree ID course with the 20% off offer. And I hope to see some of you guys on that. And thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. And have a lovely evening and happy tree hunting. I'll see you again soon. Take care for now. We'll be back again in the autumn with more. Bye, folks. Bye for now. Bye-bye.